I agree. And you know what's interesting too is when you speak about the Great Firewall, it's created an interesting effect wherein Chinese citizens are almost isolated from the rest of the world due to the firewall. And I like to think about it as in terms of evolution, wherein say a species can split off into unique subspecies due to geographic barriers. You know, a mountain range comes up, a river comes in between, whatever happens, and then a species is separated. And due to the different pressures of the two environments, they start developing their own variations. Like maybe one becomes bluer and the other has bigger fins. What I'm trying to say is like the firewall is almost acting like a geographical barrier, in that Chinese citizens have developed their own internet culture that is so unique because they're isolated from the rest of the world. They have their own version of Wojaks. They have their own internet memes. They have their own inside jokes. And due to the nature of the firewall, they cannot speak on certain topics openly. So they've developed ways to communicate what they want to say, uh, such that they avoid the censors. And that's created like a super unique environment.
Yeah, the Chinese internet is definitely a fully unique, environment that is
Mm.
to be seen if it's a positive or negative thing. But, you know, since like English is kind of influencing a lot of languages, it's interesting kind of it's it's hard to really see, but it is interesting to think about the effects it's having on how people perceive and act differently now than they would have if their language is entirely their own. Uh, so, so I guess the sort of kind of small scale is just by using the internet, you are kind of opening yourself up to an American or English language uh, mentality. You know, you have to kind of think in English. If you want to do like coding, if you want to do web development, everything is even if it the user facing side is in your native language, it's still rooted in English. And if you want to make like deep actual changes, you have to work in English, which
Hmm.
raises the question of um, how does that change how you do things? So, I think for you, like, do you notice any changes with people from Nepal? Like, you know, younger versus older generations, even though there is a myriad of differences between, other differences between, you know, people born before internet and people born after the internet. Do you see any differences that you could kind of point to that come from the use of the internet and the intermixing of English languages?
Yes, I actually can speak on this directly. So I went to Nepal when I was a child, and then I went to Nepal very recently. And in terms of culture, I think my relatives and peers that were my age understood me a lot more because we all operate on the same internet. So on a shallow surface level, they knew all of the memes that I was referencing. They knew a lot of American slang, and they were very familiar with like my way of life just because they all use Instagram. They all use YouTube. So they're watching the same videos and listening to the same songs I am. And it's similar in Korea too, where if I meet a Korean and we don't speak the same language, we still have seen the same movies, listen to the same music, we know the same memes, and they're very familiar with like American culture. And one result of the internet I've noticed is when I was younger, whenever you would go to a foreign country and you would see the English language option, it used to always have like the British flag, but very recently, at least in Korea, 100%, if you click the English menu option, it always has the American flag. So I know that creates a lot of like distress for the British. But yeah, I think American, the American accent is now seen as the default rather than the English language being taught as like that is the proper English language,
Yeah,
and then you have the American variant.
British
To the
English
point
versus American English.
Right. So when you think of English, you think of the American accent to the point where I have a lot of English teacher friends here in Korea, and they actually the academic institutions actually select for American English speakers above others just because it's the easiest for Koreans to understand. So the permeation of the English language through the internet is like the biggest difference I've seen. I don't know. Have you had any similar experiences like that with your relatives or your experience?
For me, I don't have quite the I guess, recent history to say, but I know for a fact that yeah, in Russia, you know, American memes are prevalent. And what's interesting too is I kind of noticed is Russian YouTubers kind of follow American trends as well. Um, so using the same camera angle, using the same kind of thumbnails, even the way of speaking, is in Russian, is kind of
Hmm.
American in some instances. So
Hmm.
there's definitely influence, and um, again, like memes, jokes, they have their own, of course, but there's also a lot of crossover. Uh, you know, it's an interesting mix. It's you can sometimes hard to tell where the American influence ends and where it begins.
Yeah, one negative I will say is at least in a lot of countries that or at least in Nepal's case, it feels like everyday language is still Nepali is still used with heavy usage of the English language now, especially with the younger generation. But what's really worrying is higher level um institutions such as universities, science labs, business, journalism, whatever, that's usually all conducted in English. So, there might be the odd place that still uses Nepali, but again, and I'm not an expert just because I don't live there, but from what I've seen, when you get to the really high levels, a lot of courses in universities are taught purely in English. And a lot of like technology related jobs conducted purely in English just because um that is a level at which like native languages hasn't reached yet just because it's like new words come out for elements and whatnot, right? So there might be like native words for gold or silver or copper, but when it comes to like new elements that are discovered, they usually just get like the Latin variant, and then that just becomes like the only way to express it in any language. The
Yeah.
only languages that resist this are Chinese, just because like the difficulty of the language almost acts as like a benefit because English cannot be brought over very easily into Chinese language as it can in Korean and Japanese. Um, and that's almost like you can see the difference in where I live currently, Korea, whereas a lot of English is turned into Konglish, where they'll just say like the English word in a Korean, I guess, accent, and then they'll represent it using Korean characters. So ice cream is ice cream, but North Korea, which is obviously very against the West and resistant to foreign influence, still uses Korean words for the same thing. So instead of ice cream, they use orumbasungi. I can't pronounce that correctly, but
Yeah.
in a weird way, I kind of appreciate how little their language has changed. And a part of that is just because they just don't share the same internet as us. So yeah, what do you think of that?
Yeah, I mean, it is kind of sad in a way that the only countries that kind of maintain their own language are those that are kind of up in opposition to America and American ideals.
Right.
Um, but yeah, it is in a way you could say that soft imperialism, a blending of everything into a single homogenous thing. I know in
Mhm.
Africa there was I forget I do not recall who made the video, but there was a short documentary in one of the
Mhm.
African countries where they spoke a mix of English, French and started to start speaking Russian because of the modern influence. So they
Mhm.
would interchange different languages, just in sentences. So let's go start off English, switch to French, finish off with a word in Russian. And sometimes in some areas it'd be German or Portuguese, depending on on a colonial era influence and such.